I'm sitting down with my mentor and friend, Jim Martens. Jim has had an extraordinary impact on my life, and we'll dive into that later. But Jim's a real estate investor, entrepreneur in Bowling Green, Kentucky. Guy from Michigan that came to Western, and he'll tell a little bit of his story. But I want to do this interview, Jim, because I want to sit down with you, talk about you, our relationship, your career, what you've meant to me. And I think it'd be great for people to see what you did in your career, some key moments, the good, the bad. And so that's kind of what this is for. And I'm really excited to have you tell that story. And just before we go further, I want to thank you for the influence you've had on my life. I've told you this before, but I said on camera, I met with a lot of people in the real estate industry. And your method of investing is the one that I've tried to copy and be like. And so far it's done well for me. But your story, your blueprint, and how you invest is what that's what I've thrived to be like. And so I just want to thank you for that, because without your influence, I don't know that I'm doing the things I'm doing now. So thank you. Jim, I want to ask you, do you remember the first time we met?
Oh, yeah. First of all, I want to say thank you for the honor of getting to speak and tell a little bit about my story. And I'm honored that it's helped you along your way. That was my goal. But, I remember the first time we met, all right.
When was it?
What year was it?
2016.
Oh, man.
It's 2016. No.
You're a lot older than I thought you were. That's 9 years ago.
9 years ago.
Well, it was at church, and the service was over, and Garrett Klein, a friend of mine, brought you up, and he said, "Jim, I got somebody here that wants to meet you." At first, I thought the church has hired a bouncer, and I'm about to leave church right now. But then I realized that wasn't it, and when I recognized you, and he said, his name's G Money, and I stopped him, and I said, "Your last name's Brown. You were born in Chicago. Your parents parted ways, and you were raised in Mississippi by your aunt and your grandmother, and you played junior college, and then you transferred to Western. You're number 92. You're a nose tackle, and you're a very bad man." And that's when that smile popped out and all those teeth, And,
that's exactly how that went. I'm thinking, how does he know? And truly, there was no prep. It was, I was talking to Garrett, and I mentioned you, and he said, "Oh, Jim goes to church here." I said, "What?" And so there was no prep. I'm thinking, how does he know this?
There was only two players, you and the quarterback. Was the only two out of 100 that I could have done that on. Those two were all that would fit in my head. So, but you were the main one. Forget about the quarterbacks.
Oh, Brandon Dowdy doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Well, that's very accurate. I want to ask you this, and I'm not the only person that you've helped along the way. You've been very generous, and you've been one of those people that you don't put out to the public what you do. And that's one of the reasons, because actually I was trying to find you for a while, and I know you're a Christian man, faith-based, and it was really ironic that I actually finally found you at church.
That's how the bill collectors find me too, most often, is at church. Yeah.
They found you at church and said, I know it's going to be at Sunday morning.
They found it everywhere else, but they found me at church.
And but that's one of the reasons it's kind of hard to find you, because you don't put out what you do for others to the public. What influenced you to be so helping, or as I like to call it, giving people a hand up in life? What started that for you?
I would have to say, in a nutshell, when I came to know the Lord. When I started with nothing, and I think we'll get into that later, but money was my God. I didn't have any, and my goal was to provide for my family a little more than my sisters and I had. My dad was a very hard worker. He had 5 jobs, and he was a hard worker. He was honest, and he taught us kids to be like that. And he and Mom, we had a very loving family. But I wanted to do a little better, and I was willing to outwork. I couldn't outsmart anybody, but I could outwork them. But I thought, I was a Zig Ziglar guy. If it's going to be, it's up to me. But when I came to know the Lord, Pastor Steve, and in the scripture, what good gift do you have that's not from God? Nothing. He made me, he loves me, he's going to take care of me, and he gave me all these opportunities. And when I faced my Lord and Savior, and he said, what did you do with the gifts that I gave you? Did you honor and glorify yourself, or did you help others along the way? I've had a lot of people that helped me along the way in a lot of different ways, and I never had a real mentor. I've learned kind of the hard way, and I'm a student of the game, but I've had people that helped me along my way, and as I've told you before, I just hope that someday you say, that old man helped me along my way. That's my goal. I've already been paid, but that's my goal.
I think myself and many others can definitely say that about you. I want to talk about a little bit about, and you already kind of talked about a little, your upbringing, what led you to Western, and what got you started in your real estate investing career.
Speaking of people that helped me along my way, besides my mom and dad, my little hometown in Michigan was 1,200 people, and
Battle Creek?
Actually Bellevue.
Bellevue, okay.
Battle Creek's the only one nearby that you heard of. That was huge. That's like going to Louisville, you know. And I was a farm boy, and we lived out in the country. So I lived in the suburbs of a 1,200 population. You know, we lived so far out that we had to go in toward town to even hunt. That's how far out in the sticks we were. But my little hometown, we had my high school teachers. My two favorites were my ag teacher and my industrial arts teacher. And I loved agriculture, being a farm boy, but our industrial arts teacher was a man named Mr. Don Hobeck, and he was from Grand Rapids. He could have gone anywhere, but he picked Bellevue for some reason, and I'm so thankful for that. And he was a wonderful disciplinarian, a perfectionist, and he taught woodworking classes, and he influenced not just me, so many in our school to make wood projects. And that's the first time I heard of Western Kentucky University. He was from Grand Rapids. He came to Western. His high school teacher came as a professor, and then he followed him, married a girl from here, and then moved back to Battle Creek, lived in Battle Creek, but he taught in Bellevue. And when it was time for me to graduate, I knew I wanted to study agriculture, and Michigan State University is only 40 miles away in East Lansing, and so it was natural. So I applied, I got accepted, and I thought it was the end of the story. But Mr. Hobeck stayed after me, and he kept talking about Western Kentucky University, this and that, and he said, why don't you try? He'd already influenced 3 guys ahead of me to come down here, and he arranged it. It was about this time of year. The grass was just greening up and still snowing in Michigan, and even though it's southern Michigan, and we come down here for spring break. One of the fathers and his one of my buddy's dads was bringing them back, and we stayed down here 2 or 3 days, and he said, well, just go down there and take a look. We didn't have money. I'd never been into northern Ohio or northern Indiana, even though it was 50 miles away. If we went anywhere, we went up north, as we call it. Like you're not already up north.
Like you're already at the top.
And to go up into the upper part of the lower peninsula and all that. So I come down here. I didn't know enough to get an appointment ahead of time, and I called the ag department, and they said, come on up here. And they put me with the professor that morning after his class got out, and he took me to Judy's Castle for coffee. And then the next morning they put me with another professor. And the first morning is the one that changed my life. We wouldn't be sitting here if it wasn't for him. But so I went back home, and we're riding along, and I'm thinking about my future, and there's a bridge, there's a road that goes over right at the Indiana-Michigan line. There's a bridge, and there's a sign that says, "Welcome to Michigan." And when we hit that bridge, snow flurries started coming down, and that's where the light switch came on for me. I'm going to Western Kentucky University. And that's what I did. I went home, told my mom and dad, I'm going if I can get in. And somehow they let me in. But even at that, I was going to get my degree in agriculture and go back to Battle Creek Cereal City, and I was going to work for Kellogg's, where I've got some friends and some family that worked there, and that was a great place to work, a great career, and that was going to be my life. But when as graduation approached and I realized what I was going to have to do and apply at Kellogg's and all of that, and I got to thinking about what I was going to give up if I moved back up there. And I realized how much I'd fallen in love with Bowling Green and Western Kentucky University, and I couldn't leave. I probably would have got rejected anyway, and then I don't know what I'd have done. But I never did apply at Kellogg's, and God blessed me here.
That's a great story. Can you go into your first real estate deal and then go into your Greenwood Downs and how that started?
My first real estate deal, it took me a few years after I started. May 2nd, 1974, let me go back a little bit. I wound up using my degree to go to work for the highway department. While I was there, I met an engineer that had 5 old mobile homes that he rented out. I thought, if I could be like Richard, and I mean, if you got 0 and no money, 5's a big number.
Yes, it is.
And so I just made a note of that. And a year or so later, I got an opportunity to go to work at a mobile home sales lot. Wasn't my chosen career path, but my neighbor was involved in that business, and he talked me into it, and making twice as much as I was going to make with my degree with the highway department. Wonderful people, wonderful organization, all of that, but nobody on the highway department's ever been on the Forbes 400, and neither have I. But you're not going to get rich working for the highway department. But I made a note about Richard. So fast forward, I went to work at Bonanza Mobile Homes, selling mobile homes. After about a year, I got a chance to buy a mobile home over at Skyline, over behind Warren Central, and I was going to get in the rental business. This is going to be my first step to compete with Richard Morgan. And I made a deal for $2,500. I talked a banker into loaning me $2,500 because I didn't have any money. I'm 24 years old. I've got a job but no money, and I want to buy a mobile home sitting on somebody else's property and rent it out. And if the deal blows up, I don't know what we're going to do. Used mobile homes on somebody else's property is not the chosen collateral of any banker that I've ever met. That's where I worked on my sales skills to convince them to do that for me. They'd pay off in about 3 years, but I did that, and then I got to 2, and then to 3, and then the deal of my lifetime came along for 6 mobile homes over at Skyline, and I thought, man, this is it.
You made it.
And $18,200, and I went and negotiated the deal, and went to see my banker. I went to 2 banks. Both of them said, we don't love you no more. We can't do this. And so here I am. I could triple my portfolio. I've still got no money. And I've got 3 mobile homes, and I owe $6,000 or $7,000 on those. So I'm mortgaged to the hilt, knocking down around $8,000 a year at my day job selling mobile homes. And so you can see how things, you've dealt with bankers. They were saying the right thing, just not what I wanted to hear. I went to a friend of mine that I met at Western. He's about 10 years older than me. He had a good job. His wife had a good job. And he knew me. And he knew what I was doing. And he knew me. He knew my heart. And I went to him and I said, if you'll help me get $18,200, I can get the 200. I want to do my part.
I can do 200.
If you can help me get $18,000, then you can do all the work after that you want to. But as far as I'm concerned, you're done with our partnership. As far as your obligation to me, I'm going to do everything.
Yep.
And we're going to split the profit 50-50. And he said, if we do that, would that be fair for you? He was concerned about me. And I said, well, I did a little math in my head, and I'd rather have half of 6 than all of none.
Yeah, I've heard you say that
before. I also went to the sellers to see if they'd finance it. No, they want out. They're desperate sellers. It turns out it was Denny Wedge and Jerry Wilder. Jerry Wilder, I had met early in my career at Western. He helped me get back into class one time. That was his job, and he and Danny were buddies. They played football at Western. That was before my time, but they'd come up with this scheme to get in the mobile home business and get richer, and they had all they wanted. You and I've talked about people selling due to illness. They were sick and tired.
Sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Yeah, Danny passed away a couple of years ago, and we got to be dear friends. But I always teased him about putting me under having to pay credit card rates on $18,000, trying to work my way out from under that. And he took credit for any success that I may have achieved along the way, that he helped me get my start. So we always had that little tug of war. But that's how it started. That's a long way to get to the question you asked about real estate. And after I got going, it got easier to buy another one or two or five. I bought them in groups. Some people went broke. I bought them from the bank, that kind of thing. And I wanted mobile homes because they would pay off so quickly. I didn't want houses at first. But then in the early 80s, during Jimmy Carter days, the interest rates were so high and inflation was high, and houses were going up 10% a year. And I was making about $1,000 a unit on my mobile homes. But I thought, if I could buy a house for $30,000, you could buy a 1,000-foot frame house for $30,000 over on North Sunrise, over around Lampkin Park, or in '72. For our first house, I paid $15,050 for a 3-bedroom brick. It was just one 24 by 40. It was a brick house, only 2 years old. You've had that same thing happen for you, and you'll see that same thing. It happens over and over. The way to get rich is invest a lot of money a long time ago, and you're well on your way there. I invested a long time ago. I don't know about the rich part, but I've got that part down. I started thinking about houses, and I thought if I could sell a mobile home for $3,000 and buy a house for $30,000, pay 10% down, if it just cash flowed, and if it went up 10%, I'm going to make $3,000. I'm going to have a better tenant, and I'm going to make as much on one tenant as I would on three. And so that's how I kind of started into houses. All this time I'm working 6 days a week selling mobile homes, and doing this on the side, which means mainly at night. And that's how I started. And one house turned into 3 to 5 and that kind of thing.
And one of the popular things that people on social media nowadays, and I know you're not on social media, Jim, but...
No, I've heard of it.
One of the popular things that people talk about on social media is creative financing, no money down, and how to leverage one property to the next one. And you've got a great story that I'd love for you to tell people about your Greenwood Downs and how that was the jump start to everything else, if you'll dive into that a little bit.
Well, everybody wants to buy something for no money down, and that does not define a good deal. Most of the time, if you get something for no money down, you're going to pay too much for it. You're buying financing. That's not the key. It's helpful, and it can work if you got the right deal, and I've done it. As my portfolio grew and my property type changed, that all went away. So I had to come up with Plan B. Greenwood Mobile Home Park, which is out here up the road, coincidentally, across from the post office. Billy Adams, who was the ag professor who took me to Judy's Castle that first morning, he was a real estate investor. He was just a good old boy, and easy to like. Everybody liked him, and you couldn't get an ag degree without taking him 2 or 3 or 4 classes. And before long, I learned that he had all these houses up around Western, and he had a partner. And it was brilliant what he did. We called him slumlord and everything else. Back when I was an ag major, most boys were from the farm, conservative and all. It's not quite that way now, but the idea is still the same. But you couldn't get through the ag department without having him 3 or 4 times. So if you rented from him, are you going to not pay your rent? Is he going to get a phone call at 2 o'clock in the morning from the police about,
Yeah.
No.
He's your landlord and your professor.
Yeah. It was brilliant. And he had a guy that was doing all the work, his partner. He would buy these big old houses up around Western. The bigger the better. And they would remodel them and make them into as many units as they could. And they bring them almost up to code. You know? Yeah. And it took me till I was about a junior to realize the brilliance. He was a motivator for me. And his property was not the brother-in-law type property. You take, when your brother-in-law comes to town, you take him down Scottsville Road or something. Say, no, it wasn't that kind of property. And I've had lots of those, you know, including mobile homes. But he called me one day in 1980. I hadn't talked to him in a couple of years. And he said, Jim, I got an old junk mobile home out here on Old Louisville Road, and a storm come along and a tree went through the ceiling. And it was a 12-wide home. And he said, I want to fix the ceiling back, and I want to make it presentable, and you can't find a sheet of that 12-foot ceiling board anywhere. You're in the mobile home business. Can you tell me what to do? And I said, Mr. Adams, all the things you've done for me, and I said, and what little I can do for you, I said, you've called the right guy. And I said, because nobody would handle that ceiling board. All the designs are different, and it's flimsy, it's cheap. It was $12.50 for a big sheet of it. And I said, let me tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to have a manufacturer stick a sheet of that ceiling board in the hallway, the next home that comes in from the plant. And when it comes in, I'm going to call you, and you come and get it, and I'll be glad to do that for you. So I called him up. When it came in, I called him up, and I said, the Eagle has landed. And I said, bring $12.50, and I'd prefer cash, you know, like I didn't trust him or something. And so he come over and got it. And we got to talking, and he says, is there any money in these mobile home parks? I said, I guess there's money in anything if you buy it right. This guy had built this park in the early 70s, and he was wealthy. He had it paid for. He was retired in Florida, lived in Fort Myers. It was like most of my other properties. It was undermanaged, which is a code word for poorly managed. Yep. And the manager was going to lose his job if the guy said, I'm going to come to town and I'm going to sell it. So the manager's shuffling around, talking to everybody he knew and a few strangers, you know, to see who wanted to buy it, and hopefully he could keep his job. And he came to my boss and I, and the bottom line, we made a deal for $550,000, and the seller wanted to finance $450,000 for tax purposes. And so we had to come up with $100,000. And first it was my boss and Billy and I. And I'm the young one, I'm the weak sister financially in the deal. And I just knew it'd be no problem, but it was. And they turned us down. Then my boss got discouraged. We'd put up $10,000 earnest money, and he got discouraged. And Billy said, my boss wanted out. So yeah, that's fine. And Billy said, you know, I know the president of Bowling Green Bank. He said, why don't we go over there and talk to them, you and I? Well, I had written up this like a term paper, because this was a huge deal for me. It was my first deal over $100,000. Second, I bought 2 duplexes out near Church for $123,000 the spring before that. And that was my first deal over $100,000. This is $550. So I had it all written up, and my wife typed it, and I had it in a manila folder, you know, like you turn in a term paper. And so we go down there, and not to criticize Billy, but I knew this deal up and down. Yep. And he knew it a little bit. I did most of the talking, but I had confidence because I'm sitting next to the rich guy with the connection. And so I told the story, and he went through. I've still got that folder, and he went through with a yellow marker and marked up some things. And I got through, and he asked 3 questions, and I answered them. I told him the logic and all that. The key is they were going to finance that for 25 years. And then we were going to get a 10-year AM on the $90,000, and it worked. It worked from day one. It was mispriced. It also had 4.74 acres on the front that was commercial property, which is now where Junior Food Stores and South Central Bank and the fire department sits. And it had 53 vacancies. And it still worked from day one. It was mispriced. That's how it started out. I was selling mobile homes. General Motors came to town. We filled the park up. We raised the rent in 3 years. Billy called me and he said, I want to make a deal. I want to sell out to you, and I want $200,000 above the liabilities. I don't need cash, I need income. 2106 a month for 10 years. And at 12% interest. I tried to negotiate with him, but no. Because it's still like 83 interest. It was a fair deal. I just tried to negotiate, but it didn't work. But the deal still worked. I still had a positive cash flow. It sounded like I was paying a lot of money, and I was, but we had changed the income drastically, and half of that was going to be his anyway. To go back to the original deal, Billy and I each put in $10,000, $10,000 down, $5,000 to buy out my boss. I wanted to make him feel good about things and the closing costs, and we were off and running. When I sold out to Billy, I had 3 mortgages on it. The first with the seller, the second with Bowling Green Bank and Trust, and the third with Billy. And all the time we had that frontage for sale, and it took me until 87, maybe 88 to sell it. And I netted $120,000, and I had a deal with the first mortgage holder to give them $100,000, and they would re-amortize the first mortgage. So my payment went down about $1,000. By that time, I had the second mortgage paid down to about $7,500. And that payment was $1,850. I netted $120,000. 100 went to the first, and I had 20 toward the second, and I owed about $28,000 or $29,000. So not only did I not get any money, I took $9,000 to the closing, but that wiped out that $1,800 payment. Yeah. Billy released because he moved up $120,000. Now he was second instead of first, and I didn't lose any income.
Yeah, that's the key in that. Yeah.
Now that prepared me, and it took me, and I went back to Bowling Green Bank. Dan Harbison, who's a dear friend of mine, helped me along my way. He talked his supervisor into loaning me money. They didn't want a third mortgage, and I get that. But it was all about the equity. Take a look at the equity. I've got these 2 mortgages, but look at the equity behind it, the increasing NOI, the increasing cash flow. And so therefore, I'd like for you to give me a line of credit to buy other properties. Finally, they agreed to do that. And in May of 1988, I bought my first apartment complex out north of town, 42 units. I bought it out of bankruptcy for about $700,000.
42 units, $700,000.
And they were nice. Now, a lot of them were 1 bedrooms. There were 1 and 2 bedrooms. So I needed $70,000. So I borrowed that from Bowling Green Bank for the down payment, because I still got no money. But I've got equity.
You got equity.
I borrowed that, paid it down on the property. It was owner managed, and it was making money, but he was living off of it, and that wasn't going to be the case for me. And that's how he lost it. He was paying himself first, and then he didn't have enough left to somehow to pay the bank. That's how he got in trouble. And inherited the land on top of that from his father-in-law top of that, so, but they were well built. So I got that, and I kept the accounting on that $80,000 separate. I didn't pay that out of Greenwood. I paid it off of Warren Heights Apartments is the name of the apartments out there. They're on the right-hand side going out there. Yeah. And so I paid on that. I lowered the expenses, raised the income, changed the NOI, and in a year I got another appraisal that gave me enough equity to cover paying off that. It was probably $65,000 or $70,000 that I owned then. To take that off and put it all, so now I got no money in it. And I've reloaded the gun with my equity. And then I bought Executive Plaza. I did the same kind of thing. And so Greenwood, I've got $10,000 in it, still own it. It recently appraised for $5 million. That was the springboard. I traded Warren Heights Apartments. I had it 6 years. A guy come to me and wanted to buy it. I sold him for $1,050,000. I had $450,000 or $500,000 cash coming out of it. I said, I'll sell it to you if you'll wait until I find a deal to roll into the 1031. And I did. What a blessing. I found one in Green Hills
Green Hills, Nashville area.
Yeah.
Okay.
Trapped between the Green Hills Mall and the Hills Center. Green Hills Mall is the highest end mall in the state of Tennessee. I'm not right at it. I'm not across the street, but I'm a block away.
Wow.
Paid 2.6 for it. Rolled that money into it. I borrowed about 2.1 from Farmers National Bank, again from Dan Harbison. So my $10,000 investment into Greenwood, I've got no money. Borrowed against Greenwood to buy Warren Heights, and then I traded that equity for a $2.6 million property, and
Nashville, Tennessee.
It's worth 8 or 10 times that now.
You still own that one?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah. What a blessing.
Yes.
So you can make fun of my little mobile home park deal, my manufactured housing community, but that deal changed my life. And the other properties in Tennessee, Indiana, all of that, if you do the family tree, it all traces back to Greenwood.
The first time we met in this room, actually, back in 2016 when I came here, you said something to me that I've thought about for years. And up until recently, I understand it. I'm not going to say I fully understand it, but I understand it a lot more. You said, everybody wants to cash my checks, but nobody wants my headaches. And so when you're leveraging this property for Greenwood, for Warren Heights, to now the one in Green Hills, what's your stress levels? What's your brain damage? Like, what is going on? How are you handling so many moving parts?
I really, really admire Donald Trump. When I read The Art of the Deal, when that came out,
yep.
I read that and I said, I really admire him. I don't think I like him personally. Last year during the campaign, I got to meet him, and
very cool.
I got my picture taken with him. Eva and I did, and I still feel the same. I don't like. He's doing a lot better than he was, but I don't like the way he treats people.
Yeah.
But I admire the heck to do what he's done and what he did starting out in New York City to deal with planning and zoning, to deal with the unions, to deal with contractors, and all of is amazing.
Yeah.
And he is a tough son of a gun.
Yeah.
And the way people came at him during the campaign, and he said, I put my suit on every morning and I feel like it's armor because I know they're coming every day. I'm not putting myself in the same category as him, but I thrive. I'm a problem solver. I don't know if Mike is retired now. Mike Breen, an attorney here in town, is a dear friend of mine. And he told me one time, you get to eat what you kill. And that's true. In your business, you selling real estate or you're a professional negotiator is what you are in dealing with tenants, banks, insurance companies, whoever, contractors, all of that. A friend of mine, and I'm blessed, but I'm minor league, I'm little league compared to this guy. And he told me a few years ago he hates Mondays. And I don't. I thrive on Monday morning. After my day of rest, I look forward to Monday morning and the challenges of the day and what can I do? How good can I do it? How good are you? When I'm trading stocks, trading options, making deals. I just made a deal day before yesterday for several $1 million. You'll hear about it sometime in the next year. But I love the game. I'm 74 and a half years old, and I have to look at things different now. I'm not growing. I'm not buying. God's blessed me, and I've been working for the government and for my estate for the last several years, and God has blessed me. I could have quit, but I wouldn't be happy. I love doing what I do, but I'm taking some of the risk out of it and making it easier on my family when I'm gone. I make those adjustments now when I have a little bit of control over it, as opposed to, Eva and I talk about it all the time, and we see it around us, and it's going to happen with us. It happened with my knee last summer. You're one phone call, one doctor's visit away from bad news. And so I want to take some of the risk out on the riskier stuff, and so it's not too big of a strain, because you said it a while ago, everybody, they want to cash my check, but they don't want to sit in my seat. And I can't hire anybody. You could do it, but I can't afford you. But I can't hire anybody to do what I do. Nobody's going to take care of it. Write this down. Nobody's going to take care of it like the guy whose name is on the guarantee agreement.
Yeah. Oh, I feel that one.
I'm sure you do.
Let me ask you this, kind of shifting back to our relationship. Back in 2021, you helped me finance, and I won't say help, you financed my first flip. I came to you, I said, here's what I think, we can buy this deal for. Here's what I think it would sell for. We went to the auction. I tell the story a lot. I remember I had actually quit bidding at $138,000. I was like, if somebody else bids again, I'm done. The guy bid 139. I said, oh, Jim, I'm not gonna do it. I was nervous. It's my first time even stepping to a flip. And you gave me the courage. You said, let's bid one more time. At 140, won the bid. The other guy stopped it. And I'm thinking to myself, what have I got myself into? I trusted my numbers, but I was really nervous because I hadn't done one before. I was using your money. And so that project actually, it took longer than it should have. We bought that one in September of 2021, and it didn't close till October of 2022.
Well, you are so sharp. You got us capital gains treatment on that deal on a flip. Now on TV, they don't do that. They do a 30-minute show, and it's all smooth, and they're done in 30 minutes. This one took a little bit longer.
It took a little bit longer.
But it had hair on it, and there was an IRS lien. We had to wait 120 days, and we knew all that going in, and that's why it was a bargain. The same thing applies with other deals, I'm so proud of you and what you've done, and as I eased out of selling mobile homes, and I was in the rental, and then when I quit my job in '85, and then I was buying mobile homes, financing them, and I put them in the park, and I could make a little bit on lot rent, make a little bit on the home, and then charge more than market rent, or more than my cost of capital. So I'd make a little bit of money on all three ways, but that was time consuming. You can only do so much. Yeah. You already know that. You've got a great family, you're working hard in sales, you're working hard in your rental business, making deals. There's a limit to what you can do. And when I bought my third project in Tennessee, I told the bank, and they didn't ask me to do it, but I said, if we can get this deal, I said, I'm going to quit selling mobile homes. It was lucrative. That year I did over 100 deals. But there's a limit to what you can do. If you're going to sail bigger ships, you got to get to deeper water, and you've got to leave some things behind. I got out of those apartments. I had another apartment project in Glasgow, but when I sold those, I focused on retail then. Is that always it's probably the most risky, but I love the challenge. Renting apartments was not challenging it to me anymore. There's money in it. I mean, it's all good. And gradually switched to apartments. I bought the first one in '93 in Glasgow, and then Bandywood was in '94. And since '96, that's been my main focus, is retail.
You mentioned that was the one that gave you to be able to quit your job. So I've actually never told you this story before. When we finally sold that flip, we grossed on that before we split. We grossed on that deal just over $72,000, and that money is actually what gave me the confidence to leave my full-time job and to go into real estate full-time. And a big reason that gave me the confidence was because I was having my first baby girl, and so I'm thinking, man, this one deal just made me what I was making the entire year at my W-2 job, and so that gave me a cushion to go and keep going. And shortly after that, something that you taught me, I had gotten a line of credit on my very first property. I had about $150K line of credit. I bought this property out in Brownsville for like $120, put about $15 in it, and I sold that one a couple months later. It was a quick turnaround, and I made another $50,000.
Awesome, but I wasn't in on that deal. I never heard from you.
No. But you had helped me. You had helped me with that first flip. And you taught me about the equity and getting that line of credit, and the numbers worked. And that was the thing that propelled me to like, man, I can keep doing this. And I never asked you this, I don't believe, but what made you trust me to even say, I'm going to help this guy out?
Well, when we met, you told me that you were working on your MBA and studying under Dr. Randy Capps.
Yep.
what a wonderful man.
Yes, indeed.
I didn't get the privilege of studying under him. I met him when I was on the WKU Foundation Board, and I didn't get to know him well. They've got assigned seats around the boardroom, and he always sat, sometimes it changed, but he was always on the other side of the room from me. And you were the reason that he and I got to know each other, because we'd talk about you and how proud we were of you. And I told him, I said, until I met you, Dr. Capps, I didn't know who was in charge of the seating arrangement, because I'd be sitting by different people, and I'd always tease them about being on their way out. You know, if they're sitting by me, one of us is leaving. I said, I know you're in charge of it because you're always way on the other side and you don't have to fool with me. But Dr. Capps, he influenced so many lives of people. You were one of the first ones that I've met, but through the leadership program up there, I've met so many other people that he mentored. And you were in that program. You're working on your MBA. You're extremely successful grade point average wise. I'm not going to tell you what my GPA was, but yours is approximately twice mine, maybe 3 times, somewhere in that range.
Goodness.
I'm not much with numbers. And you listened. Everybody wants to sit in my seat, but they don't want to start where I started. They see where I'm at today, but they don't want to start with no money and a mobile home over at Skyline. You know, they don't want to start where they're at. It's the same if I want to lose weight or if I want to, do whatever. You got to start where you're at. The book, and you read it, by Marco Harrelson. There's 2 books that have changed my life. How to Wake Up the Financial Genius Inside You by Marco Harrelson, and The Holy Bible. Yes, those are the 2 books. I've read 1 or 2 others, but those 2 changed my life. And he taught me, Mark Harrelson taught me in that book. I was doing it without any money because that's the only way it was going to get done. Yeah. But he did it that way on purpose. And where I see people fail now, in my opinion, and everybody has different goals, and that's fine, but they want to live off the money. When the hard time hits, then they got to sell, maybe not at the opportune time. And when the deal of a lifetime comes along, they're not prepared for it. What I did, I was always preparing for the next deal. I had a banker tell me a few years ago, and I've used it at our church meeting, how long can you hold your breath? In 2010, I was buying my biggest project, which is over in Moorhead. It's 210,000-foot Kroger Center. It was from Nationwide Insurance. I shouldn't mention them because I'm still in a lawsuit with them, because Nationwide, they were advertising they were on my side, but they weren't. They were on the other side. But anyway, they were selling, and I was able to buy that project at a 10 cap with 53,000 feet vacant out of 210,000.
Bought it at a 10 cap.
And that's at a 10 cap, that's talking about paying the CAM taxes and insurance on the vacancy too. That's the way that I just sold a property on Scottsville Road, and it had my former partner had already rehabbed that, and I bought half of it and then bought the other half. And it was a good deal for an investor, a passive investor, but I didn't make what I usually make because I like to buy them empty, rehab them, and then re-tenant them. Same way with houses, mobile homes, whatever. Look for bad changeables. Just like you did with that house. There were bad circumstances. The IRS lien, anybody else goes to the bank, that's not financeable to 90% of the people.
Correct.
Knowing that there's an IRS lien on it, they want a first mortgage, and you have to sit with it. You have to be prepared for that. And we knew what we were up against, and it wasn't any problem because we prepared for it and bought it accordingly. But a lot of people passed on that because they saw that, and when they talked to their friendly lender, like they told me on the $18,000 deal, we don't love you no more right now. And that's what has worked the best for me. And to do that, you have to have a war chest of equity or cash. And usually I was paying down that line of credit because, and I've used the term with you, retrievable equity.
Yep.
If you've got a $100,000 property and the bank will loan you 80%, if you've got a $50,000 mortgage, then you've got $30,000 in what I would call retrievable equity to use to buy another deal. And so that's what I kept. When I bought that one, the bank said, we'll loan you $6 million on it. And I said, fine. And I had another property. I paid 8.1 for it, and with all that vacancy, you got to spend money on tenant improvements, commissions, all of that to change the income. And every time I did that, at one time I had 9.4 in it. But I used that as an infant property. I attacked the principal because I bought it at a 10 cap, and interest rates were low then. Attacked it and used a large line of credit I had on Bandywood. And I think I used another one too, maybe that I had on my Morgan Stanley account. I don't recall exactly, but I think I used 2 lines of credit because to get from 6 million to 9.4, that's serious.
Yeah.
But it all worked. It all more than paid the interest, and then when I got it all put together, then I refinanced it and paid those off, consolidated it into one. How much money have I got into it? 0. And now my lines of credit back open, and I'm open for business for the next deal. That's how I did. Everybody's got their own way. Any good banker can tell you 20 ways that everybody does something different. Yeah. I think it'd be so interesting from that point of view to see how other people do, because you're looking in their hand. That's kind of what worked for me to accomplish what little I've been able to accomplish, but I did it with income producing property. Some people do it with land, with raw land. Well, that's a rich man's game. You've either got to have the cash to buy it and wait, or you've got to have the income to be able to borrow it all and wait and pay the debt service on it, or some combination of the two. Either way, there's no income.
Two more questions for you here. I've talked to people in the past about you and your career, and a lot of people respond saying, Jim took a lot more risk than I was ever willing to take. What's your thoughts on that when people say, I couldn't necessarily be Jim because he took on a lot more risk and it worked out for him? And what do you say about that?
I've never heard that said, but I suspect that's true. This business, and you know it, and I told you, this isn't for everybody.
No.
It isn't for everybody. Years ago, I went to a seminar up in Cincinnati. This was about single-family houses, and there was a guy, he had 120 houses, and he said, my wife was kind of leery about what we were doing and, going to the bank and borrowing money and all that. And he said, one day we bought a house, and on the way home, my wife said, this isn't a bad deal. We buy the house and somebody else pays for it. Yeah. And he said that was one of the best days of my life. She got it. She understood, we're not paying for it. The income, and as you know, the income buys the property. With income property. You're buying an income stream, and it comes down to a question of what will you pay for that likely income stream, and how can you change it? It goes for houses. Can you, if you buy an older house, can you doll up the kitchen and bathrooms? That's what the ladies like.
Yep.
And change the value. Can you spend $10,000 and make $20 by doing that? That's bad changeables. You can't change the location, the address, the floor plan. Most often, you can't do those things. And so when I bought shopping centers, what can I do? And back when I was buying houses, apartments, what can I do to change the bad changeables? How much is that going to cost, and what can I get out of it?
I want to ask you this last question here. You mentioned you bought one property at a 10 cap. What's the highest cap you've bought at?
I don't know if I could answer that one. What I always looked at, I don't remember specifically, but hopefully I told you, it doesn't matter I know there's another friend of ours that I've mentored, and I told him, when interest rates were going up, he still wanted to pay the same money. And I said, that property is not worth, that condo is not worth that much now because interest rates have gone up. Yeah. He said, well, I got comps. I said, yeah, you were the comps, when you're borrowing at 3% and interest rate goes to 6 or 7 or 8.
Big difference. Then
you can't pay the same. And he learned that, but it took him a while for that to sink in. He said, well, the comps, I'm using it's like going to the auction and bidding against yourself. Who was that? Oh, that was you. Yeah, and what I always looked at is what is your cost of capital, whether it's a fixed rate or a floating rate. If it was a fixed rate, always buy at a cap rate at least 2% above your cost of capital.
Okay.
At least. More is better. And that's why when I was paying 2%, that covers a lot of sin. But if that 2% turns into 5 or 6, you better have made a good deal. The market doesn't care what your interest rate is.
No, it does not.
The market does not care. And just because somebody else will pay that. When you go to an auction and walk away, you thought that property, you were the one that bid the highest, that was willing and able to close the deal. You bid higher than anybody there.
Yeah, 100 people.
I always felt like a fool walking away from the auction. Oh, darn, I bought that. Well, I feel good about myself. Well, wait a minute. No, I was the highest bidder. I don't know if that's a good deal or not. We'll find out. Stay tuned. You're signed up for the roller coaster ride. We'll find out.
Jim, I appreciate you taking the time today to sit down with me. Again, I just want to tell you, really, thank you for the influence you had on my career, the things you've done to help me.
So you're retiring now?
I got about 40 more years.
Oh, okay.
40 more years, I have the banks paid off, and then I can probably enjoy a little bit.
The way to get rich is invest a lot of money a long time ago. I told you that. You've done that, and I'm proud of you for doing that. And all you've got to do is hang in there, and you'll be wealthy. But that's not what you're going to do. You're going to keep growing it and making it better, and God bless you for that.
Well, I want to tell you this too. Last thing here. I was going back. Not going back. I remember this text so vividly. When I finished my MBA, you sent me a text one morning. I mean, maybe at 6 a.m. you sent me this text, and it said, "Congrats on completing your MBA. You're finally a taxpayer." Now we start the process.
August 2nd.
Now we start the process of making you a millionaire. And at that moment, I didn't fully understand what you meant. Like I understood the words, but I didn't fully understand the gravity.
You thought I was going to write you a check? That wouldn't have helped you too much.
No. But I often think about many things, but that text that you sent me and just really thank you for what you've done for me, seriously. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. God bless you.